Kazas onholu operach. I'm sorry, I tried, but I don't speak Spanish, so I really can't figure out how to read this. But the English title is Days of Honor. This is a game about a very original subject. I don't remember playing other games with the same theme. It is set in World War II, but not your usual game about the Battle of the Bulge or about the Eastern Front. It is about a much smaller event. The game is set around a German test site in German-occupied Poland, and the Germans are testing their rockets, and after each trial there are fragments of rockets, of the rockets scattered all around the base. And hiding just outside of the base are Polish freedom fighters, partisans and soldiers trying to grab those fragments and to bring them back home so that they can be studied and they can be passed on to intelligence services that can figure out ways of reproducing or preventing or fighting against the German rockets. And the Germans, of course, are perfectly aware of the value of those fragments, so as soon as the fragments hit the ground, the Germans also send out people to try to recover them. So the game takes place in the no man's land between the areas where the Polish partisans are hiding and the area where the Germans are launching their test. And so it's about sneaking around, grabbing those fragments, the occasional fight when groups of Germans and Polish freedom fighters end up being in the same place. This is a card game, but it has a spatial component. That means that, yes, the players have unique decks that represent the resources they have. Some cards represent event and abstract resources, and some other cards, however, represent units, fighting units, that are placed in the play area, and then they're moved around to perform various tasks. Days of Honor, this is the general idea. Let me show you how the game works.
The play area is divided in 3 ideal invisible bands, each corresponding to one of these 3 cards. The bands are the German home base, and that represents the rocket test site. You have the woods where the Polish partisans are hiding, and this is the home area of the Polish player. And then you have the middle area, the periphery, the no man's land, where fragments of the rockets will fall and where the players will try to retrieve them before the opponent does. Each player has a deck of cards. At the beginning of each turn, you will draw 5 cards, regardless of how many cards you have in hand at that point. Then, after players have drawn their cards, you reveal a card from this deck. This tells you the number of fragments that become available that turn. For example, here we have 5 fragments. You take the corresponding number of fragments and you place them in the no man's land. The game lasts 4 turns, and there are 5 cards that will produce fragments. That means that 1 card will never be used in a game, so you do not know exactly the number of fragments that will become available throughout the game. You play for 4 turns. At the end of the 4th turn, the player that collected most fragments in his home area is the winner. After new fragments have been added to the no man's land, players will alternate taking turns or taking rounds, and in each round each player can only perform a single thing. There are 3 possible things that you can perform as your action for the round. You could play an action card. Action cards are identified by that symbol there, and you play it from hand and you simply resolve the effect, which is symbolized by the icons at the bottom of the card. Or you can choose to play a support card. This is the symbol. Or a unit card. Unit cards have a colored corner, and the support or unit card that you played goes in your home area. And for example, suppose that I've spent 4 rounds. Each round I've added a card to the play area. That would be my situation. As your action for the turn, you can also choose to use one of the actions that the cards on the table make available to you. and those actions are represented by those icons. So you choose one of the icons on one of your cards, you resolve the effect indicated by that icon, and then you exhaust the card. You turn it by 90 degrees to indicate that that card already used one of its actions. There are ways of refreshing this. For example, one of the effects of the support card, represented by this symbol here, is command. So you exhaust this card to use this action, and the effect of this action is to refresh a unit that already used his action. There are also cards that produce immediate effects. They are identified by the symbol here, and they're played whenever the effect applies, whenever you want to use the effect. They do not count as your action for the round. Now, possible effects for the units are to move, so you can use a unit to move, and by using an action you can move the unit by one area from one band to the other. Another action that you could take is to look for fragments. If you are in the periphery, this is the area indicated by that icon, then you roll a die, and if you rolled a 4 or more, you will be able to move a fragment from the no man's land to your own home base. If there are enemy units in the same area as the unit that you're activating, you could attack the enemy unit, and this is the action that you use. This is one. Cards that have an attack action have different numbers of bullets indicated here. What you do is you roll a die, you add the number of bullets provided by the unit that is attacking. The opponent rolls a die and adds the number of units provided by the target unit, and then you compare the results. If the attacker gets a total that is higher than the total of the opponent, then the attacker wins the fight and the card of the opponent is removed. Otherwise, nothing happens. The attacker doesn't lose a card for failing to attack an opponent successfully. And then you have multiple other effects. For example, this effect here allows you to look for fragments and to take them if you score 4 or more, but to do that not from the no man's land, but from the home base of the opponent. There are other game effects that allow you to protect your cards, for your fragments, against this type of effects. Also, you have escort cards. An escort card has this area here, well, cards with an escort effect, and if you use the escort effect, then the card that you're using as escort becomes the target of an attack from an opponent. Of course, the escort needs to be in the same area as the card that is being attacked. And then you have effects that will provide you with assistance to your die rolls, nurses that will prevent a card that would be eliminated from being eliminated, cards that will give you automatic victory in combat, such as this one. A lot of possible effects, but the general gist of the game is that players will place cards on the play area. They will move them around to perform actions such as grabbing fragments, attacking each other, stealing fragments from the opponent's area. And they will continue like this. They will alternate taking actions until both players pass in a row. At that point, the turn is over, and you start the next turn by drawing cards, revealing a new card that will create new fragments, and again alternating taking actions. The game continues like this until the end of the 4th turn, at the end of which the player that collected the most fragments is the winner of the game.
It's okay. It's not a bad game. It's not a bad game. It's not a game that I enjoyed very much. I just found it very dry. I found it a little claustrophobic, but not like in the good sense like you have in horror games. Claustrophobic in the sense that I felt that the options were not many. And they were pretty obvious. There were some things about timing, yes, about when to use certain actions, but overall the game didn't feel like it was more than the sum of the parts. It felt like I was executing the tasks that were supposed to at the best of the possibilities given to me by my deck. I was moving a card, exhausting it, exhaust another one to refresh it, perform what it does. repeat, play another game effect. Oh, this is a very important role, so I'm gonna play a card that gives me a bonus. Oh, this is a very important attack, I'm gonna play this card. The scope of the game feels pretty limited. And again, I'm not talking about the scope like the theme or the area covered or the length. The fact that the game, for example, plays fast, doesn't last long, is a bonus because it's always good to have light games that you can teach easily and that you can play quickly. But it just felt, I would say, that actually the scope of gameplay probably wasn't enough to really keep me interested. My impression throughout the game was I was feeling lukewarm interest. It wasn't bad, it wasn't a blast, it was somewhere in between, maybe towards the, I don't know, probably should be playing something a little more exciting instead side of things. It's an okay game. It's an okay game. One of the problems, though, probably something that's a little more objectively minus, is the fact that luck plays a huge role. Not because you roll many dice. In games where you already roll dice 1,000 times, paradoxically things will tend to even out statistically. But when you just roll dice here and there, and a unit of yours can be destroyed by a bad roll, 5 units can be destroyed, 4 units by bad rolls, then that makes luck pretty relevant. If your good units are destroyed and and you don't have a card that protects them in your hand, then there isn't much really that you can do. In this sense, it reminded me of a game that I played a long time ago, which was Blockade Runner, which also was a game where you would roll dice occasionally, but those die rolls had a huge impact on the design. And that to me is a problem. I like games with a lot of luck or a little more airtight. Here there is that combination of not many die rolls, your game can depend on those. And yes, then, well, if a game is just destroyed by that, the interest of the game is destroyed by that because one of the sides is stoned by that, then you decide you can decide to end the game early and to start the game again, or to start another game, because again, it's not like you feel like, at least for me, oh, this game is so exciting, too bad it didn't go well that way. I thought that's a game that it was mildly interesting to start with. On top of that, luck really made this game meaningless. Should we try again, or should we play another game that in most cases is interesting, and maybe occasionally luck plays too big of a role? It's just that you have, at least for me, an average gameplay, averagely, a little less than average, probably entertaining experience with that factor, with that big minus. Then to me, this is a bad combination of things. To me, this is an okay game. It's not hard to teach. The icons do take a while to get used to, though, so that frankly is another minus. If the learning curve has some bumps along the way and then gameplay is rewarding, that was a good investment. If you end up having a gameplay experience which is just average, that you can have with less learning or with less luck, or maybe you can just have a game that is more interesting, that is better. So great theme, I think it's a great idea behind the game, the implementation of the game, the mechanics that the game has behind, to me make for a non-very interesting game, unfortunately. Days of Honors by Phalanx, good attempt, well-meant attempt, not an attempt that is very successful, at least in my opinion.